Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Estate and Money, where we talk about the economic news and how it relates to the real estate market. My name is Chris Gorman, and today we're going to be talking about the concept called de-dollarization. Now, that's a term that you might not have heard before. It's not a word that we use very often in our everyday vocabulary. But what it means is the general moving away from the dollar on the global scale in terms of it's being the currency of choice for the global economy. Ever since the end of essentially World War II, the United States dollar has been the world standard currency. It was a safe place. It was a stable currency that, if Brazil wanted to do a deal with China for a trade agreement, they would first convert their currency into US dollars. China would then accept those US dollars as payment and then convert them back into their yuan, in order to use how they please. That was the way it was, and our dollar was backed by not gold. We've been off the gold standard since the 1970s, but it has been what's called the petrodollar, and that means that it was backed by oil. Um, in recent history, our biggest export as a country has been our debt. Foreign governments, most famously China, has bought the United States debt and held it because it's a stable investment. Has been for some time. When the global economy, however, decides to start trading in their own currencies or develop a brand new currency, as is the case with an organization called BRICS, which is a group of countries that represents a major portion of the global product, and that is Brazil, Russia, India, China. They've recently added South Africa, and there's 19 other countries that have expressed interest in joining this group, with the goal of basically being trade partners outside of the US dollar. When that happens, and our dollar is no longer seen as the world standard currency, something very interesting happens to our economy, and that is our biggest export, our debt, is no longer valuable. Now, whatever your political beliefs are, there's no denying that our national debt and our government spending has been out of hand for quite some time. There's no arguing that. They've been able to do that though because our debt has always remained in demand. Countries could buy our treasuries and hold them and know that that was a stable investment because of the strength of the dollar. And in relation to, like, what do we put out as a country in terms of gross domestic product? We don't contribute anything anymore in terms of actually adding product, food or goods, manufactured goods, energy. We don't add anything uh, compared to some of these other countries. So it's a scary thing that could happen if the dollar goes away. And granted, this isn't something that's going to happen necessarily even in our lifetime. Maybe our kids or our kids' kids. Um, but people tend to forget how young the United States is. It's 250-year-old country. When you look from a historical context, that's a baby. We're still an infant, and a lot of the things that we take for granted and the stability and the freedoms are very much still an experiment. And we tend to just think that they're going to remain forever. That's a very egocentric position to take. They're not, they won't. And if we continue to be irresponsible with our finances, the same thing is going to ultimately happen as if it were you being irresponsible with your finances and you were spending the money that you didn't have, or a company was spending money that it didn't have. Eventually, you go broke. And there's no finagling that. I mean, over time, the chickens have to come home to roost. So we either have to turn this thing around, or what is inevitably going to happen is the global economy choosing another currency to do deals in, which would mean our debt becomes less attractive, which would mean our national debt now becomes a really, really big problem for us here at home. Um, our paper money essentially becomes worthless. with inflation has been a hot button recently, and the reason why inflation happens, of course, is because you have more dollars available due to printing currency. You have more dollars for the same amount of goods and services. Now, if the United States could figure out a way to elevate their goods and services contribution to the world to offset those new dollars, then inflation balances out. But without that contribution of product to the marketplace, you're putting more dollars out there for the same amount of goods, making each one of those dollars less valuable in and of itself. That is, in a nutshell, what inflation is. And you can't spend your way out of it. There's just no logical explanation to do that. So the Inflation Reduction Act, where we're spending trillions of dollars, just on its face makes no sense. You cannot spend your way out of. You can't print your way out of inflation. It's not going to work. But we've become really good at kicking cans down the road and making it somebody else's problem. So, in a nutshell, how does this all relate to real estate? We've got de-dollarization starting to happen. I didn't even mention the reason why I'm talking about this. Just Google it. Google de-dollarization, and you're going to find a plethora of articles within the last month that are going to show Brazil and China doing deals outside of the US dollar, Russia and Iran doing deals outside of the US dollar, Saudi Arabia and Russia doing deals outside of the US dollar at a pace that we haven't seen before in history. And if you extrapolate that where that's going, then it's easy to see the trend of what's happening. And it's something that people don't want to talk about because the implications of it are pretty scary. But what do? You're going to see people on TV and on the radio that tell you to buy gold. Gold has been a safe haven against the dollar. It's been a hedge against the dollar forever. I want to say a couple things about gold. I don't own gold, and I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money. But if we're looking at a potential catastrophic economic failure as a potential result where we're going, what good does gold do? Yeah, you might be able to trade it for a more valuable currency and buy goods and services with it. But at the end of the day, gold has very little utility. It's used in some electronics, not nearly as much as silver is used. Gold used to be used in ancient cultures like the Aztecs. They made a lot of things out of gold because it's a soft metal. It's malleable. They can mold it and shape it into whatever they want very easily without a lot of modern technology that we have today. Can't do that with iron, for instance. And it was pretty available. And then we assign intrinsic value to it. Gold has value because we say it does. If tomorrow we wake up and we decide that aluminum foil has value, well, then gold just lost everything because it's not useful. Land is different. Food is different. Water is different. Energy is different. Those things are basic needs. They will always have value forever and ever, regardless of what countries' economies do. You've heard it before, but they're not making any more dirt, right? If the world goes to hell in a handbasket, landowners, farmers, those are going to be the valuable people and commodities. We're not going to be turning to Mark Zuckerberg to give us an answer in the event of a food or an energy crisis. Nobody's going to care about Facebook or YouTube or Google. They're going to be looking for farmers. How do you grow stuff out of this ground? Where is the ground? Where is the fertile land? How do you get water to it? How do you distribute these crops and store them? And this is just a skill set that nobody really cares about anymore. And if it really comes down to it, those are the only skills that matter. So it's just an interesting thing to kind of be aware of. But at the end of the day, if the dollar loses its value, land never will. So it will be a hedge against the dollar, and it won't be a hedge like gold where you have to go find another currency to make it valuable. It'll be useful just on its surface by virtue of the fact that you've got land and you can grow stuff and you can sustain yourself and provide shelter for your family. So as it relates to real estate, I'm really really bullish, I say go buy land, go buy dirt, buy as much as you can, invest in real estate, housing. Um, People will always, always, always need a place to live, and it will hedge against inflation, and it will hedge against de-dollarization. It just will. So those are my 2 cents on all of that. There's so much to, there's so much to talk about here in relating to the things that I've mentioned that you could really really dive deep. And I anybody that's watching this, if you've watched this far, if you disagree with me about anything I said, that's great. I mean, we happen to live in a country where we can disagree and we can have conversation, and let's do that. Like, challenge me. I would love to have that debate. I would love to have that conversation. I think it's a blessing that we can even do that, and we need to protect our ability to disagree and to have debate, because it's healthy and it's how we all learn and it's how we all grow. So uh, please challenge me, and if you want to talk about this in deeper context, I'd love to do that too. So love talking about this stuff. I hope this was helpful and educational. I'll be back when I have more to say, and I want to talk about the upcoming Fed meeting in May. There's a lot of back and forth on what the Fed's going to do with the federal funds rate, whether they're going to continue to raise. They're talking about another 25 basis points, quarter percent, or if some people think they should do nothing, some people think they should start retreating, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Um, we got the inflation numbers from March, and it's trickling down a little bit, so they're it seems to be trending in the right direction. The one thing I will say about the interest rates and the Fed, completely unrelated to this conversation about de-dollarization, um, they cannot really cool housing with interest rate hikes without completely decimating the underlying economic infrastructure. Um, we have a serious supply problem. We did not build enough homes for about a decade following the Great Recession, and we're paying the price. We have a supply shortage. Now, they're trying to catch up by building apartments and multifamily homes. But in terms of single family homes, like, we have such a supply shortage. The only way to really cool off the market is to inject a lot of supply. Um, they're trying to attack the other side of the coin by going after demand, by raising interest rates. But at the end of the day, when people are faced with high rent or high mortgage, they're always going to choose high mortgage if they can afford to, because it's the smart choice. So, um, yeah, I just don't see the Fed winning this battle with housing. I think the solution is much more local. It's easing regulations and restrictions, making it easier for developers to bring homes up out of the ground, uh, zoning restrictions, all sorts of things. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be necessary, because if we don't do anything, the gap between the rich and the poor is going to go so wide, and it's going to be based on whether you own property or you don't own property. And there will become an inflection point where if you are not in, you're not getting in. And we're getting dangerously close to that inflection point. Um, so my hope is that they wake up and realize that this is a regulatory issue, not a financing issue, and they take the necessary steps to correct that. But it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, and the Fed needs to focus on other things besides real estate, because they don't have the tools to fight that battle. So my 2 cents. All right, thanks so much for watching. If you're still here, please like this, share this, subscribe to this, and I'll keep it coming. Thanks so much. Have a great day.